Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na. Okay, I think that was the theme song to Forrest Gump. I couldn't hit the high notes, but I have 7 spiritual lessons from Forrest Gump, the movie, and it's a great movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, and it has a great soundtrack. You know, Tom Hanks. Great acting and great direction. Robert Zemeckis. It came out in 1994. So here are spiritual lessons from that movie, from Forrest Gump. Number 1, remember the opening scene with the feather, right? So the feather is kind of just floating around in the wind. And the feather also is in the end too. So it bookends in the beginning and the end. But the feather, so the feather represents like driftwood. You're just going with the flow of the universe. Give up control, right? Become like driftwood in the ocean of the ocean of life, of consciousness, and you get taken along where you're supposed to go. Not the ego. The ego wants to be in control. So the feather symbolizes letting go and letting God. So be like a feather. The surrender experiment writer, Michael Singer, wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment and Untethered Soul. He wrote that too. So it's the same idea. Become like a feather. So that image in the beginning of the film sort of sets up thematically what Forrest Gump is basically going to do. He basically is sort of like a feather, and he drifts and goes along with life, and life takes him to all these crazy situations, everything from civil rights situations to the Vietnam War, to meeting presidents and so forth. So he just sort of is like a feather. So lesson number 1, be like a feather. And I know how that's hard to do for a lot of people, but you surrender, you let go control. So that's number 1. Number 2, lesson number 2 is the quote, life is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get, right? My mama says, life is like a box of chocolate. I can't do a good impersonation, but so you don't know what you're going to get. So that's, again, a great spiritual lesson, is that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. Again, it goes along with the control, is giving up control, but you don't know. Life is going to bring you what you need for your consciousness to grow, right? I got that from Eckhart Tolle. So on the spiritual path, life is you're going to think, and many times you think, oh, I'm going to have this chocolate. I'm going to have, oh, I like this chocolate, but it's you think it's going to be caramel, but it's coconut, right? So you don't know what you're going to get. And that's sort of the beauty of it. So life is like a box of chocolate. you don't know what you're going to get. And so many times we want control. We want to dictate how life should be, right? Or we're upset that this has happened, or this situation has happened. This piece of chocolate that you didn't want comes into your life, so you have to accept. So life is about, so what's coming to me is radical acceptance. You don't know what you're going to get. And change is also a part. Everything is change in this world of form. So connect to the changeless, connect to your true eternal self. And whatever box of chocolate you get, or whatever chocolate that you get, you don't mind. You don't mind. I don't know, that's very difficult, but the mind has been conditioned to just wanting these things that, things that our mind wants. But no, you embrace all of life. Radical acceptance comes to mind. Radical acceptance. Okay, so that's spiritual lesson number 2. Already great, powerful lessons from this movie. Spiritual lesson number 3 is, so the character Forrest Gump is sort of like a simpleton. I think I can say that word, right? He's a simpleton. He's not the sharpest person around, right? And he's guileless. He's not clever. He's just, again, like the feather. He's almost like a child, right? So when we go on the spiritual path, in a way, we need to adopt being simple, being not trying to be clever and heady and trying to outthink, things and spiritual. Even in the spiritual realm, it's trying to understand this and becoming a learned spiritual person, right? And learning about all the Hindu gods and Buddhist gods and almost becoming like a spiritual philosopher. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but it could get in the way of the simpleness of knowing your eternal truth and just life. Life is simple. Just this now moment, eternal now moment is simple, right? So become like a child. It doesn't mean you do use your faculties. I admit I'm not the smartest person. I listen to some of these spiritual teachers and they have high IQs, and I'm just like, okay. I guess I understand what you're saying, but still, it comes to me, at least. It comes back to this moment. Okay, being fulfilled, being simple and being fulfilled in this moment. Jesus says that phrase, be like children and you can enter the kingdom of heaven, something like that. So that's being simple and being not jaded, right? We as adults, we become jaded and cynical, right? And it's difficult for us just to enjoy the simplicity of life. Okay, so lesson number 3, just develop. It actually comes naturally as you awaken and as you deepen. You become more simple, I guess, or you see the world more simply, in a beautiful way. And not saying that you still can't understand complex stuff, but at the end of the day, you're just like, you're bewildered and at peace with the simplicity of life and all its beauty. And the simplicity in Source and Awakening. I mean, it could be complex because of the mind and integrating, blah, blah, blah. But at its core, it's so simple. Awakening is simple. It's just letting go, no mind, just the spaciousness of the present moment. You realize that realization of the simple nature of your eternal truth. Okay, so that's lesson number 3. Be simple, like Forrest Gump. All right, lesson number 4. So in my mind, Forrest Gump represents unconditional love and acceptance. Unconditional love. All right. And specifically, his unconditional love for Lieutenant Dan and Jenny. All right. Jenny, we're like peas and carrots. Jenny and me. So unconditional love. So he sees, he keeps writing to Jenny, my girl, and he's constantly, even though she blows him off a bunch of times and keeps going on her path, because Jenny represents one side. Jenny and Lieutenant Dan represents hard egoic conditioning. She was had a terrible childhood. She was sexually abused and by her father, and that trauma she continued throughout the story to sort of, she was affected by the trauma, so she was always in pain and suffering, right? So she kept on doing, so she couldn't find love, right? She was searching for love, but she was so damaged, right, by the past. And Lieutenant Dan, his story, I guess, could be summed up as he was from a military family, and all his father, grandfather, great grandfather, all the way served in the military, right? And each one of them, I guess, did well but ended up dying in the military. So he had this egoic fixation of being this military person identity and dying in battle. And so when Forrest Gump saves him, he's resentful, right? And in a way, I just realized you don't know. I mean, life's like a box of chocolate, not just for Forrest Gump, for all the characters, for Jenny and Lieutenant Dan. They got things that they didn't expect that were going to happen, and through the process of Forrest Gump's unconditional love, because he continued to be there for them, and in a way, both of them ended up having their own sort of awakening, having peace. So Source is unconditional love. Source is unconditional love and is always there for you, right? Source, and Source will allow you to go through the journey that you need to go through. Like Lieutenant Dan needed to be resentful in a wheelchair, drink, and then he ended up going with Forrest with the shrimp boat that he promised him that if he became a shrimp boat, if he got a shrimp boat, whatever, he'd help him and be captain or whatever. And in that one scene, you could see near the on the boat where Lieutenant Dan goes, he has sort of a dark night of a soul, if you want to call it that, where he curses God, or he's angry at God during the storm, where he's in the crow's nest or whatever up on the ship mast, and he's cursing God. He's like, and I've been there many a times, and he's angry and resentful. But God just unconditional love just continues, right? It's continued. And finally, Lieutenant Dan gave up. And he gave up the resentment. And we got a train going by. So Lieutenant Dan ended up finding peace. Lieutenant Dan found peace, right? And so there's that scene where he's swimming in the ocean and he's at peace finally, right? So that unconditional love that Forrest Gump sort of represents, what Source is, allowed Lieutenant Dan to change at his own pace, right? So we all have to go through our own karmic whatever, right, at our own pace, but the unconditional love is always there and ready to take you in its arm, if you want to say that, when you're ready to let go. Okay, when you're ready to let go. And in Jenny's case, she comes back to Forrest Gump. They sleep together, and then she leaves again, and has his child, but then they get married. So in a way, again, and she found peace. She gave up the unconditional love by Forrest Gump, or Source, allowed her to find the peace that was in her all along. But she had to go chasing things and going all around the country and doing drugs and blah, 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 until she found peace. She found the inner peace, which is her true self. And Lieutenant Dan did too. All right, so unconditional love. All right, so the fifth lesson is, it's a pretty there's a lot of violence in that film. I mean, everything from the Civil War to Vietnam War to assassinations. I mean, there's so you have JFK, I think JFK, RFK, MLK, and a couple other people, Ronald Reagan and John Lennon. So all these assassinations, right? So there's a lot, and also if you remember, the Jenny's boyfriend was a peace protester, right? But he hit her, and he was very angry. So that's something you have to be mindful of, is wanting to change the world and be peaceful, but you haven't healed the anger and the hatred that's inside you, right? So but it's all very, but it's a very violent. I mean, violent a lot of violence that happened in the 60s and 70s. I guess the movie ended in the 80s. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that not much has changed, right? Not much has changed. It's February 2023 right now. And just look, on the news. There's a lot of violence still out there. And also there's a lot of violence on social media, and it's not people beating each other up or killing, with guns. There's a lot of emotional violence with words, right? So a lot of suffering still exists today. So the reason I'm bringing this stuff is because things haven't really changed, and that's why more and more people awakening, because when you're at peace, no ego. There's what violence seems silly. Seems silly. Not saying that you can't protect yourself if something's happened, but I'm just saying that in general, the idea of committing violence is almost silly. It's silly. It's like so. If you're on a spiritual path, well, you probably are, because you're watching this. Yeah, work on healing the pain bodies of anger and resentfulness and by, because we all have it in us. We all have it in us to various degrees. I was very resentful before, and had a lot of even violence to yourself, I guess, because I had a lot of suicidal stuff. So not just violence towards other people, but violence toward yourself, right? So work on healing that, because your eternal truth is peace, right? Is peace and love. So, all right. So, that's the fifth one. So the sixth one is, okay. So I found some notes. So the sixth one is the running sequence. So remember, Forrest, run, Forrest, run. So remember, after I think the mom died or something, and Jenny left, and Forrest just decided to go running, right? So he goes running all around the country, ocean to ocean, and in this instance, Forrest is running away from his problems, and you get to so he runs from his problems, and then finally in the desert, by the way, I think it was Monument Valley, in the desert, he was running and followed by followers, and he stops, and like a prophet, they're like, shh, be quiet, he's going to say something. They're expecting this prophet. He became sort of like this mystical, mythological figure, right? Like a prophet. And that they were expecting him to say something very profound, right? And he says, I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go home. So, and then they sort of part like the Red Sea, and like Moses, he at least that's the interpretation I got, kind of walks through them. So, but actually what he says is very profound. I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go home. I'm pretty tired. So, two ways that I'm interpreting this. One is before awakening, you're a seeker, or maybe I'll just do it this one way. But you're a seeker, and you're seeking, and you're seeking, and you're running. You're running to something. You're thinking that if you do these meditations, these chants, these acts of service, and all of them are great, very important too. I mean, they could be very helpful. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but I'm just saying you could have that idea that by doing all these things, that you're going to it's going to awaken you in the future, but it never comes. So you're running and you're running and you're running, right? And it's only until you get tired of trying to have an awakening where you just let go. I'm tired, I'm letting go, I want to go home. I'm going back home. And back home means your eternal truth. So in this instance, I'm tired, I'm going home. I'm giving up the chasing. It's sort of like Buddha, doing all of the aesthetic stuff, starving himself, doing all those things that the other spiritual people did back 2,500 years ago. And he starved himself, and I'm sure he did mantras or prayer or whatever it was. And he's like, he got tired of it, and he said, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm going back home. And he sat under the Bodhi tree. At least that's the story. He sat under the tree, and he became enlightened. So the Adyashanti also talks about that too, where he was doing all these spiritual practices, and he finally got tired. He said, that's it, I'm just tired. So he let go, and then he had an awakening, or one of his awakenings. So that's the running sequence, that the ego death. So you're running. So the ego could be running towards the goal of enlightenment, and but the ego can never become enlightened, and you have to let go. You have to die before you die. So the psychological death. So oftentimes that happens when people get tired and frustrated with this, with seeking, and they're just like, that's it. I'm done. And then boom, they have an awakening. All right. So the last spiritual lesson, I think this is 7, is just a couple quotes, few quotes, like the box of chocolate quote. Stupid is as stupid does. That's it. That's a good quote, because we're basically, even intelligent people, or quote unquote moralistic people, do stupid things. We all do stupid things. We've all have done stupid things. We're unconscious, and the sin, I think Eckhart Tolle was the first time I read about what the word sin meant, was missing the mark. So, or being stupid, doing stupid things, being unconscious. So we're all sort of have done that. So that's what I got. So awakening, hopefully we start doing less stupid things. I certainly have done less stupid things. Not saying that I still don't do a stupid thing every once in a while, but all right. The second quote is Mama said, "You've got to put the past behind you before you can move on. Very good. I mean, that's a gem right there. You got to put the past, you got to let go of the past. And I know it's very hard. It was hard for me to let go of the past. I'm still letting go of some stuff, but you got to let go of the past. And within that, also let go of a future too. You could be grasping and identified with a certain future, a certain idea that you have of you. Remember, be like a feather, be like a feather, be like driftwood. So yeah, let go of the past. That's one of a spiritual practice that is very powerful, and just continue to do it. Continue letting go of the past. Right? The past no longer exists. I mean, I do know some people who still, unfortunately, carry the past in them, and I totally relate, because I used to do it too. I mean, to the point where things that happened 30, 40 years ago, it still seems like it happened yesterday, right? I mean, don't you ever have pain? I mean, I used to have these pain bodies that I would get triggered, and it would seem, just even thinking of of something that happened, 30, 20, 40, whatever years ago. And so I totally understand, but you just have to continually let go of the past. Listen to Mama Gump. I forgot what the character's name was. Sally, or what was the actor's name? Sally Field. She had a lot of wisdom. I have to give it to her. This other quote is, Mama always said, dying was a part of life. I sure wish it wasn't, says Forrest Gump. But yeah, dying is a part of life. You get to the point where you don't say the last thing Forrest Gump says, is that you accept it. It's a part of, without life, there's no death. I mean, death and life go with each other, right? Yeah, I just had a recent death in the family too. So it's just a part of life. You grieve and you go through that, but you recognize that it's just a part of this incarnation, and it sucks not having that person around anymore, but on a spiritual level, that they're here, that their spirit remains, right? All right, so the last quote I want to bring up is, Forrest Gump said this: "When I got tired, I slept. When I got hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went to the bathroom, So that's very, very Zen, right? Very Zen. I think he's talking about when he was in Vietnam. But it's a very Zen quote. I wrote this down. It's a Zen story. The student once asked his teacher, "Master, what is enlightenment?" The master replied, "When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep." And then the master goes on to say, the difference is that I'm present with it, while everybody else is in their head or not being present. So that's a very Zen saying by Forrest Gump. So that's it. That's all I got. So see the movie again. I'm sure most of you have seen it. And if you haven't, see it again, or see it for the first time. And hopefully these spiritual lessons have been helpful. So again, be like a feather. Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na. Until we meet again next time in this beautiful Life is a Box of Chocolate Now moment.